Hello there. You're listening to Manufacturing Tomorrow, brought to you by the Ohio Manufacturing Institute at The Ohio State University, where we discuss the latest innovations, challenges, and advancements shaping the world of manufacturing. I'm Katherine Kelly, your host. Today, we are excited to speak with Mike Adkins, owner and principal of Performance Results Plus, or PRP, a 100-year-old precision manufacturer headquartered just a stone's throw from The Ohio State University in Columbus. PRP's core business is hydrological instrumentation, the precision equipment that measures flowing water for municipalities, agricultural districts, universities, and government agencies. Their customer list includes the United States Geological Survey, the Tennessee Valley Authority, Air Force Research Lab at Wright-Patterson, Yellowstone National Park, and a growing global customer base. Mike took ownership of PRP in November 2020, stepping into an established operation where he wasted no time expanding its capacity and diversifying its product lines. PRP's 12,000 square foot facility houses more than 20 CNC machining centers, lathes, and milling machines, producing over 10,000 precision parts across steel, aluminum, copper, brass, and plastics. Mike leads the company as a certified Ohio veteran-friendly business enterprise and shares the same lean manufacturing discipline to other small Ohio manufacturers through Lean Performance Plus. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Catherine. Great to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, I think there's a lot more to that than my intro. So let's talk a little bit about your origin story. You purchased this existing manufacturing business in late 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic. Oh, what drew you to PRP and what did you see in it that others might have missed?
Sure. In the middle of the pandemic, kind of started looking around for companies in 2018 and 2019. And stepping back, I was blessed to be able to take a couple of my pension plans, converted them over to equity using the governmental ROBS program, which is converting pension into 401k and then 401k rollover of business assets into equity, which is a real interesting SBA program. And I just wanted to highlight that for the audience because you can take your 401k at some point and you could leverage it to be able to buy a company. That program exists. And it's just a super program that we can all take advantage of uh, as part of the SBA opportunities. So I started looking in 2018 and 2019. I've got a mechanical engineering background, worked for mechanical engineering companies my whole life. Started looking at a couple of different companies. And what really interested me about Rickley Hydrological at the time was that it had a niche market. It had a very unique customer base. I know the governmental procurement process, the government kind of how they work. And when I walked around the shop, there was a couple of things that really attracted me. One of them, if you know Southwest Airlines, they'll fly the 737. That's it, just one plane. We only have one type of brand equipment back here. It's the Haas brand. There's great advantage of having one brand piece of equipment. Number one, everybody can see and everybody can load, and everybody knows the G and the M code. You don't have to learn 5 different brands of machine code. You learn one. There's some commonality of parts. There's some commonality of how you approach the repair, how you approach the PMs, et cetera, et cetera. There's great value in that. So I followed the Southwest Airlines model, which everybody learns in business school. There's huge differentiation in value. And I saw that. Then the other thing I really saw was look at all of these different chests full of tooling, full of a variety of tooling, full of test instruments. There was a lot of what I would call good bones, solid foundation when you walked around in the shop looking at it. There clearly was a good history of manufacturing. And I toured a couple of other facilities, and you walked around and you saw machines, but there wasn't any tooling. There wasn't anything that would tell you that these guys had anything behind what they were doing with that machine. And that really attracted me. So it was taking a look at the equipment, but looking behind, kind of behind the curtain, seeing what really was going on. And Brickley Hydrological had that. And I had enough history and background in working at all these other manufacturers. And I ran a manufacturing company, 550 person manufacturing facility, to be able to look at it and go, okay, this has got what we need to be successful. So it passed that muster, passed the sniff test. And that was pretty important. So that was part of that origin story.
So for listeners who may not be familiar, what does hydrological instrumentation actually do, and what does accurate water flow measurement how does that matter for municipalities, the agricultural sector, and agencies like the U.S. Geological Survey?
Sure, that's a great question. Measuring water is critical to society, critical to drinking water, critical to all of our municipalities. We don't see it, but it's all around us, the water infrastructure. Every state has a watershed the state's broken up into different watersheds, different water municipalities. There's people that are assigned to manage these different municipalities, these different watersheds. And they're actually required to monitor and to measure that water. So they measure, they monitor the water. They're required to report and to manage the dams, and in some instances, they'll tie together. So this dam will open, this further down they'll close, and there's this great choreography that happens up and down all of these dams, levees, and rivers based on the rainfall, based on the weather patterns. So the Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Geological Survey, the ODNR, all of these different water management organizations are trying to optimize the water flow, and they're trying to minimize the flood impact on the communities and everywhere, all up and down the United States. So imagine those folks down in New Orleans if everybody said, yep, let's just let all the water go. And they're not doing that. So the local lakes and rivers and channels here, we're trying to stop Alum Creek, let it fill up. Okay, it's going to be dry for the next few days. Open it up and let the water go down. So this is happening in a choreography all up and down all of these different rivers, estuaries across the entire United States. Many of them have sensors. And if you go to the USGS website, there's actually a map where you can see like 1,400 of these sensors all across the United States, and you could kind of see them active. Now, you can't really understand very well what they mean. You have to kind of look at them and start to figure out what they all mean. But it's pretty cool to know that we're managing that. Now, you compare that to some other countries where they don't have that infrastructure build, and that's where you see cities that are getting overtaken by floods. And then you see some other communities where, the rivers are running dry and people are having a hard time finding good drinking water. And that's the whole thing that we're trying to do. And not only are we trying to do that here in the United States, but the USGS reaches out to other countries, and we're trying to promote our model of managing water across to South American countries, to European and African countries. We just got an order from an African country that's buying all USGS specified equipment. And what they're doing is they actually said, we're trying to rebuild our infrastructure to be able to manage water. And they're buying 100% USGS specified equipment. I thought it was great. It's over $150,000 order. Pretty big order.
And that's fascinating, and it really ties into my next question. That PRP has been serving customers for more than 100 years, and today you're shipping to South Korea, Chile, Pakistan, the Philippines, and beyond. So, how does a small Columbus-based manufacturer compete internationally in such a specialized area?
We're competing effectively, in my mind, because we have. I think the strategy that I would describe it is we're the niche player. We have a specialty with foundry and pattern manufacturing. We're one of the last companies in the United States and maybe globally that has a capability and a specialty to be able to take a pattern, a sand casting pattern, send it to one of just a couple of foundries located here in Ohio. And I've got a very interesting sidebar story about that. Send it to the foundry. The foundry will make a brass or a cast iron uh, uh, a pattern part for us. They'll send it back to us. Then we'll end up finish cleaning it. We'll have to drill certain parts. We'll have to balance it. Obviously, we'll put some other bits and pieces. We'll drill some holes in it, all that. We'll end up putting a front to it where you put a water bottle so it'll do a sample. We actually have a sediment sampler that's got jaws that'll go down and it'll pick a sample off the river that they could pick back up. Pretty neat stuff. We have a foundry broker that we use where he goes to the Amish community in central Ohio and we get Amish cast parts, and they are beautiful, fantastic craftsmen. And we're using castings that some of the Amish use, and fantastic, good on them. They're making buggy cast parts still, and they're making some aluminum cast parts for us for handles, for this, for that. And they're making beautiful cast parts for the USGS. Pretty
And that was,
fascinating that we're using cast parts from a foundry that's doing buggy parts.
and you found that through the broker?
Found that through a broker who knew some of these small foundry operations that are still run by the families.
Wow. Well, so small manufacturers are navigating the tariffs, the reshoring pressures, supply chain volatility, and economic uncertainty all at once. How is PRP thinking through those headwinds, and what are you watching most closely right now?
That's a great question, Catherine. We're probably some of the biggest issues that we have is trying to rebuild some of the supply chains, particularly when somebody orders what I call a C item. We have thousands of parts that we manufacture. A items, we've got a great supply chain. We keep that supply chain robust, stable. We're constantly ordering. The whole thing's flexible. In lean manufacturing, we'd call that a tension supply chain because it's constantly running. And it's like a rubber band. It's constantly going back and forth. So it's healthy. The B items, rubber band still, but maybe not quite as elastic. C item, there's no rubber band there. Sometimes there's not even a supply chain and we're having to rebuild it. And we've found after the pandemic that in many instances, those vendors have just gone away. So that happened particularly for lead castings And for a variety of reasons, we determined that we just were going to stop making lead sediment sample, lead sounding weights. Number one, not good for the environment. And why do I want to make a 50-pound lead weight that's going to go down in a river, potentially get lost, and then just sit there and put lead in a river for the next 25 years? I don't want to do that. So we decided, let's get away from lead. The only lead supplier I could find was in Florida. They were making lead walls, maybe for submarines or something. And then they would they would pour lead for us for sounding weight. But it just the supply chain was just horrific, because then I had to ship a 50-pound piece of lead from Florida up to here. The cost of doing that was exorbitant compared to the value. So stop doing that. That's just one example of a inelastic supply chain. So we went to brass and did some other things. The other big issue that we found, and this was maybe what I would call being a micro manufacturer, less than $5 million, less than 20 employees. When the government shut down in the fourth quarter last year, I felt like they just kind of forgot about the small manufacturers that were all connected to the government. And I had a $25,000 shipment that was going to the USGS, was going to Oregon. It was sitting on the dock. It was ready to go the day that they shut the government down. And I could not ship it. And it was a $23,000 order. And for 50 days, it sat at the dock and it was tied up. And it was a terrible reminder that the government was shut down. And Democrat, Republican, Independent, didn't matter to me. I was not happy. I can't believe that the US government was doing this to us. And agnostic to what party you were in, it was just terrible. And finally, the government reopened. I was able to ship it. Somebody took pity on us, and we got paid 5 days after we shipped it, which was highly unusual. Usually, they don't pay you for 45 days after you ship it. But that was the most pain that I have felt in the 5 years that I've ran the business was this last fourth quarter. And it was a result of the shutdown of the government. That was more painful than coming out of COVID, because I think coming out of COVID, there was a lot more empathy and people were a lot more supportive. Nobody cared after the government shutdown. And I was surprised that the government wasn't helping small businesses get past some of the pain that they were creating. There was no, hey, let's give you some emergency relief, let's do something. And I talked to a couple of, I can't give you the names of the company, but I talked to a couple of folks that just gave up. And I was hearing something like 60,000 businesses just disappeared at the end of that fourth quarter.
Well, and I've heard a lot of stories coming out of COVID with the supply chain and shipping, and we did a number of interviews around the U.S. through the NIST MEP program to assess the issues, and so I mean that what you're saying resonates on some level, but definitely takes it to a different level as well. Let's get back to
Sure.
the precision manufacturing part of your business. You're manufacturing more than 10,000 machine parts for your own equipment on site, and that includes the CNC lathes, mills, complex geometries, electronics integration. Walk us through what your shop floor looks like and what makes low volume, high precision manufacturing different from the higher volume production environments.
Sure. So that's a natural next step. And I thank you for helping with that pivot. So the question when you're in that pain point that I just described was, what can we do to try to get out of this? And we were asking ourselves that, what are we good at? And one thing came to light: we're making all these parts internally that are really, really good parts, but we haven't offered it to the marketplace. So that's what we decided to do. And so we make thousands of our own internal components out of brass, aluminum, and a variety of different parts. And so I said, okay, let's start to offer precision components to the marketplace. And I went to a couple of different venues, and uh, we put together a little precision components brochure. We put together a little box full of a couple of interesting geometries. We put together a very interesting shaft and some parts that showed dimensionally some real interesting things that we did, and started showing some of these pieces parts. And surprisingly, we got a little bit of traction, and we've got a couple of people that gave us some test parts, and we've gotten some orders out of it. It's not quite as fast as I'd like to see it, but we are getting some traction and we're getting some interest. And the interest is in two different areas. One of them is, hey, I have a need for a small round component. It's a precision component. Can you make 1,000 of these? Sure. And we're making 1,000 of them. And we're actually finishing the job up right now. It's sitting outside the wall here in our shipping area. And the second one is actually a project working with a professor at OSU. Hey, I'm working on this new project. Here's the concept. Can you help us with this prototype? And then this prototype is going to turn into 300 units next year. Can you do the assembly work? And the assembly work is a combination of plastic, aluminum, and electrical assembly. And if you take a look at what Matt does when he's not helping with the podcast, Matt's doing electrical, plastic, and assembly work. And so it's a good fit for what we already do. So we're going to be taking a real hard look at getting into the right type of those jobs, because that's what we do today.
Well, that's
And
exciting.
yeah, it is. It's very exciting. And I think that's the next level of where PRP is going to go. It's the intersection, the smart intersection of mechanical, electrical, and still staying in the water wheelhouse. This piece of equipment that we're working with them on is a water piece. It's a piece of water equipment. I don't want to go any further than that, but it it operates in the water and it performs a function in the water, which is pretty cool. So that's kind of where precision components is going. We do, and we're working on a separate website. We're going to have a separate division of the company, Precision Components, and we'll just keep growing that part of the business. The idea is, in the future, as the government ebbs and flows, and we've got to be ready for the highs and the lows, this precision components business can be a little bit more stable, and it can offset some of those highs and lows, and we don't have to feel the pain of the government shutdown next time that happens, and we'll be a little bit more resilient for it.
As you enter into this growth strategy, you operate PRP on lean principles, and you've extended that into Lean Performance Plus. How do you apply lean as a growth tool for a small manufacturer, not just a cost-cutting exercise? And what do you see that could help other small Ohio shops use lean to leverage their success? I mean, that was one of
That,
the determining factors that we found is that the companies that were using lean were better able to pivot and adjust.
that's a great question. And one of the ways that we've used lean here, and I'll just go all the way back to the beginning. The company, when I first bought it, had about 20 employees. And as I walked around, I saw a lot of people doing single jobs. And it was, it almost looked like, and it reminded me of the very beginning of the Toyota story where somebody's doing a single job and it wasn't the dignified human job. It was going back all the way to the beginning of the story. And I was watching that going, well, we got to make some changes around here. We've got to do this a little bit differently. So the first thing I did was I asked to let's find who wants to be the leader of the operation. And we found, thankfully, I found a very good leader. And I found somebody that didn't know the concepts, what the words were, but had a natural affinity to lean. And I think one of the first conversations I had with him is he goes, well, I don't know really what the words are in lean, but I like to do the next job better than I did that job every time I try the next job. I want to do better at it and do better at it. And his name's Adam. And I said, well, Adam, I think that'll work for me. And I said, you got the idea. So, and Adam's been with me for about 5.5 years now. So we started down this journey. About half of the team members in the company decided that they didn't want to do lean or they wanted to go do something else. There was this natural self selection, if you will, where, okay, I'm not into lean or I don't want to do this or do that. And the group kind of went down to a smaller team. And then we started working on multi skills and we started looking at who wants to learn how to run multiple machines and who wants to learn how to how to code at the machine and learn G code, learn M code. And then all of a sudden we put the Fusion 360 computer on the shop. So you fast forward and we redesigned the shop floor. When I first got here, the shop floor just had a machines placed willy-nilly all over the place. Now we have a lathe cell with 4 lathes. And if you stand in the center, you could see all 4 lathes. One person can run all 4 lathes simultaneously. You've got a mill center where you could run all 3 of the mills. One of the 3 mills, the employees said, you know, Mike, when we run a brass job, it is terrible cleaning the brass out and then switching over to another material. We'd like to dedicate one of the 3 just for brass because it's so hard to clean out the brass. I said, if you guys want to do that, go ahead. So one of the 3 is our dedicated brass machine. The other 2, the faster 2, are doing everything else. And I said, that's great. You guys figure out how you want to run it. And so today what'll happen is we'll get a part. If they have to, they'll go over to the Fusion 360 CAD CAM. They'll design the part. They'll get the code. They'll pop it in. They'll maybe make a few changes. Oh, by the way, when we write the code at the top of the program, we'll actually tell you what the part is. We'll tell you what the fixtures are. We'll tell you what the tools are so that the next time that you run, you know everything that's been used to run that program. So you're not having to make it up again. And then, so when it's stored in the main library, You don't have to redesign the whole thing. You just pop it right in and go. So that's something that we've done for continuous improvement, that as we kind of go through the parts, it's just super easy to do that.
Mhm.
So then um, run the part, and then if you make some improvements, store it, make an improvement, and put it back in the library. So that's part of that continuous improvement. That's how we're running it. So now instead of needing 20 people, I've got a workforce of 12. I've got full timers, I've got part timers, I've got college folks that are working for me. I've got a couple of OSU slash uh, Columbus State Community College, a couple of folks that are doing that. I just sponsored a OSU export development program to do a international marketing project on the company. They just completed it last week, which was pretty interesting. Um, I get some of these export folks to work with me, and then they just kind of glom onto me. And I've now had one for 18 months, and he's going to work on a project this summer. So, pretty interesting. I've got a great group of folks. And not only is it manufacturing and lean, but it just kind of keeps going. And we're using the other thing I guess I'd say is we're using lean on the front end of the business and the back end of the business. On the front end of the business, we had a terrible telephone system, and you want to talk about leaning out. So we took this archaic phone system that nobody could operate, threw the thing out. We bought a phone system that's actually on a computer, on an app. And Catherine, we also spend less money per month on the new phone system than we did the old. So that's a great lean tool. Better service to the customer, better response time, lower cost to the company. That's a great lean example.
Oh, exactly. So my last question is going to be a bit of a combination. So, I mean, you've said as an entrepreneur that you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So, what's the most important thing that you've learned since taking ownership of PRP? And, what would you tell another small manufacturer who wants to grow and isn't sure where to start? And also, I mean, what would you say to somebody who would be interested in a career in precision manufacturing? So I'm trying to combine two into one
Sure,
here.
sure. Um, I think the first thing that I would tell somebody is, and this is a cliche from Alcoa, my 10 years with Alcoa, people linchpin the system. You've got to find the right people to fit the way you want to run the company and to fit your culture, and build that culture and invest in those folks, and allow those folks to run the company with you, and trust in those people. And I trust in my folks to make the right decisions, and I empower them. They're here. Adam is here at 6:20 in the morning. I don't get here at 6:20 in the morning. I've got people here at 6 p.m. I'm not here at 6 p.m. There's thousands of decisions that your employees are making every day that you're not making. You've got to empower them. You got to build the culture. They have to understand the rules, and the rules are real simple. I always talk about the rules for my folks, and I use three buckets. I talk about three different buckets. I say there's betting the chicken, there's betting the barn, and there's betting the farm. You can bet the chicken all day long. That's your decision. When you when you're going to bet the barn, let's talk about it. I'm the one that bets the farm. So figure out which one of those three we're betting, and then let's have that discussion. So they bet the chicken all the time. We bet the barn together, and I bet the farm. And I probably have used that analogy 1,000 times. The, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and it's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. For 5 years, I told myself that this is going to get easier. This is going to get easier. This is going to get easier. I told myself that after COVID. And then we had all this other stuff happen with the government and Doge and the shutdown and all these other things. And now we have the whole issue with the war in Ukraine and Russia, and now with the war in Iran. So just get comfortable with being uncomfortable, manage the things that we could manage. Don't fret about the things that we can't manage, and do the best job that we can positioning our business to be successful. And for me, what that meant was optimize the hydrological as best I can and look around and figure out what else can I do. And I started working on precision components about 9-10 months ago and push it as hard as I can. And I wish I could push it faster, but I'm pushing it as fast as I can.
Thank you for your advice, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Great podcast. I'm so glad that I'm so close to you guys, and I'm happy to do that again and welcome you to come over and walk the shop floor anytime you'd like.
I'll make sure I do that. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.